Don't drink the Kool-Aid. We say that as a joke now. But on November 18, 1978, it was deadly serious. In the middle of remote jungle in Guyana, 918 people, including 304 children, died after being ordered to drink the Kool-Aid poison. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a natural disaster. It was the largest mass suicide in the modern history, orchestrated by one man, Jim Jones. But this wasn't just a suicide. It was a cult, a movement, a social experiment turned doomsday trap, and it was decades in making. This is not just a story of death, it is a story of manipulation, power, madness, and the question we all ask, how the hell did this happen? This is the story of Jonestown massacre. In order to understand Jim Jones, we need to go back to his early childhood days. Jim Jones was born on 13th May 1931 in the small town of Crete, Indiana, into a home of poverty and contradiction. His father, a disabled World War I veteran and alleged Ku Klux Klan member, was distinct and alcoholic. His mother, Lynette, was eccentric and ambitious, instilling in Jim a belief that he was designed for greatness. They lived on the margins, such as poor, isolated, and rarely attending church. But a neighbor named Kennedy gave young Jim his first Bible and took him to Nazarene church. That little spark, Jones became obsessed with religion, death, and society's outcasts, particularly African Americans, despite the deep segregation of 1930s Indiana. From early childhood, he stood out for all the wrong reasons. Neighbors remember him as the weird kid, prone to violent outbursts, cursing, and holding mock funerals for roadkill. He even stabbed a cat to death just to conduct a funeral, hinting at a disturbing fixation on death and ritual. Alone and rejected, Jones turned inward and theoretical. He preached to empty field and played in backyards. In the town library, he read books on Hitler, Stalin, Gandhi, and Marx, observing one common thread: power through charisma. By the age 10, he claimed to have supernatural power, once showing a child into traffic only to pull him back, calling himself guided by the angel of death. He was both bully and savior, a saint and a manipulator. He stole candies for thrill, cursed adults like his mother, and took pride in being different. By his teenage years, he was already rehearsing fierce sermons in secret, mimicking the candid of rival preachers. Jim Jones wasn't just preparing to be a preacher, he was preparing to command. By 17, Jim had graduated high school in Richmond, Indiana, with one foot in the real world and the other in the spiritual. He enrolled at Indiana University, briefly considering law, but the pulpit pulled harder. In 1948, while working as an hospital orderly, he met Marceline, a kind, devoted nursing student from a respected Quaker family. She was everything Jones wasn't, which is, she was gentle, steady, idealistic, sensing both a love and opportunity. Jim pursued her obsessively. He lied about being a Quaker and spun stories of his fight against racism, like storming out of a barber shop over anti-black discrimination to win over her. Despite red flags, they married in 1949. Marceline became his anchor and first disciple, standing by him through his erratic moods, such as lies and growing obsession with power. Jones dabbled in college classes, but his true education came from church hopping across denominations. He was mesmerized by Pentecostal revivalism, the shouting, the trance, the miracles. By 1952, at age 21, he declared
he would become a minister not to save souls, but to fuse Christianity with socialism. In a bold move for 1950s America, Jones envisioned the church as a vehicle for racial and economical justice. Surprisingly, the Methodist Church gave him a chance. He became a student pastor at Somerset Southside Methodist in a poor Indianapolis neighborhood. From day one, he rattled the status quota. He invited black children to play on the church's new integrated playground. He spoke in tongues, claimed he could heal, told children about miracles he witnessed or performed. Church elders were uneasy. Integration was taboo. So was Pentecostal flamboyancy in a Methodist church. By 1954, Jim Jones was out officially for the mismanagement of financial, though he claimed it was because he welcomed black people. At just 23, unemployed and controversial, Jim Jones stood at the fork in the road. He could have played it safe. Instead, he doubled down. In 1954, Jim Jones launched his own church from a shabby storefront in South Indianapolis. He called it Community Unit, an interracial working class ministry where black and white families worship side by side. That alone was a radical for 1950s Indiana. While Marceline by his side, Jones knocked on doors, preached equality, and promised action over empty sermons. But attendance was thin, money was tighter, and Jones needed attention. So he got creative. He sold monkeys door to door. Yes, the actual monkeys to raise funds. Still, the crowd did not come. That's when he spotted the power of faith healing, dramatic Pentecostal performance that packed revival tents. If he could master that showmanship, he could build a momentum. In June 1956, he struck gold. Jones convinced the legendary healing evangelist William to co-headline a five-night revel with him at Indianapolis Cattle. Over 11,000 people came, black and white, singing in union. William vowed the crowd would be healing. Jones studied every move and copied them. He began mimicking William's tricks, pulling divine information fed to him by staff, performing staged healing using props like chicken giblet disguised as tumors. It worked. On the final night, William declared Jones a chosen vessel. For Jones, it was the public that he craved. Suddenly, his obscure ministry was booming. He renamed it Wings of Deliverance, then quickly rebranded it again as People's Temple Full Gospel Church. By year's end, he had over 1,000 followers. He moved into a bigger buildings, including a former synagogue downtown, where sunlight shone through stained glasses onto an integrated, electrified congregation. Jones, just 25, preached fire and justice, wiped sweat from his brow, and promised paradise. His stage miracle kept them hooked. People's Temple wasn't just a church anymore, it was a show, and the curtain had only just risen. By late 1950s, Jim Jones was no longer just a young preacher. He was a rising local celebrity in Indianapolis, nicknamed the Apostle of Integration. Jones landed soup for the homeless, ran food and nursing programs for the poor, and openly defined the city's deeply rooted segregation. His church, People's Temple, was one of the first fully integrated congregations in the town. Many white members left, but the black families poured in, drawn to white preachers who not only preached equality but lived. At home, James and his wife began adopting children of different races, creating what they called as the Rainbow Family. They adopted a white girl, three Korean American war orphans, and in 1961, the first white couple in Indiana to adopt a black child. Jim Jr. to racist, they were offensive. To Jones, they were the perfect symbol of his message and his brand. But behind the But behind the image, cracks were forming, while the public saw a passionate activist inside who witnessed a different Jim, such as manipulative, paranoid, and increasingly authoritarian. He staged fake miracles using actors and props, claimed divine powers, and demanded absolute loyalty. Disintegrated, humiliated, even beaten, some members were coerced into sex, farmed as a test of faith. Still, Jones' public image soared. He was appointed to the Indianapolis Human Rights Commission, appeared in newspaper, and hosted a radio show. By 1962, paranoia took over. He claimed to have visions of nuclear, cited an inquiry article naming North California as a safe haven. He began warning his flocks nuclear war is coming. Later that year, facing increasing hostility in Indiana, some real staged, Jones fled to Brazil with his family, scouting a potential temple outpost. The trip failed. He returned in 1963 to a weakened church and doubled down on a doomsday prophecy. In 1964, he was officially ordained in the Disciples of Christ, giving him mainstream credibility. But privately, he claimed July 15, 1961 would be the day the bombs dropped. By 1961, Jim Jones convinced 140 of his most loyal members to uproot their lives and follow him west to Red Hood Valley, California. It was a remote, quiet, and shielded from scrutiny. He called it Sanctuary, a place to build that he had dreamed of. In reality, it was beginning of a deeper descent. By 1962, Jim Jones has become a respected figure in Indiana, but behind the scene, paranoia was growing. He began preaching of nuclear war, claiming he had visions of America's destruction. The Cuban Missile Crisis had just rocked the nation, and Jones seized the fear. He pointed to an article which was listed on Northern California as one of the safest places to survive nuclear war. God, he said, had revealed it as the temple's new promised land. Around the same time, Jones faced rising hostility in Indiana, death threat, racial backlash. Some of it was real, some possibility to keep his followers on edge. That summer, Jones abruptly left the country. He and his family traveled to Brazil in search of a safe haven for the temple. But the mission did not work because money was short and the language barrier was too. He returned to Indianapolis in 1963 to find church crumbling. Followers were drifting to reassert control. Jones intensified his doomsday warning and elevated his own status as a prophet leader. In 1964, he gained ordination in Disciples of Christ, giving his movement a mainstream legitimacy. But privately, he told close followers that July 15, 1967 would mark the end nuclear bombs would fall. By early 1965, Jones had about 140 loyal followers to uproot their life and move west. In summer, caravans of people Caravans of People's Temple members headed to Red Hood Valley, California, a remote, wooded region far from cities' targets and outside scrutiny. Jones purchased lands and modest church, declaring it as a sanctuary. Here he promised they would build a safe church from war, rooted in equality and peace. Many believed him. They sold their houses, quit their jobs, and followed him to the forest. The Indiana chapter of People's Temple was over, but in California, the real cult was about to begin. In California, Jim Jones rebranded himself once again, not just as a preacher, but as a god. The People's Temple in Redwood Valley rapidly expanded as Jones sent teams across the country, drawing in poor, the lonely, and the idealistic with promises of racial equality and socialism and communal living. His message restored into the radical spirits of 1960s. By the early 1970s, temple branches had opened in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Busloads of followers traveled to attend his services, and Jones used this number to gain political clout, mobilizing support from progressive campaigns, helping win local elections, and earning praise as a humanitarian. In 1976, he was appointed chairman of the San Francisco Housing Authority. Even First Lady Carter took note. But behind the scenes, the People's Temple was darkening. Jones demanded to be called as Father, claimed he was Christ or Buddha reincarnated. Jones demanded to be called as Father, claimed he was Christ or maybe Buddha, and subjected followers to public beatings, sexual coercion, and extreme loyalty tests. He stacked white knives, midnight grills preparing members for suicide or armed attacks. Outsiders saw a church feeding the hunger, and inside communities lived under fear, manipulation, and absolute control. Jones ruled through a carefully orchestrated mix of charisma and cruelty, preaching love day by day, enforcing terror night by night. The irony was chilling. The man once hailed as a civil rights hero was now rehearsing mass death behind closed doors. The dream had crumbled into nightmare, and with every day, every stage healing, every whispered threat, Jim Jones drawing his followers closer to the edge. The world would remember Jonestown as a tragedy, but the descent had begun long before. Back in the rival tents, in a quiet manipulation, in the boy who practiced power through death, the mask was still on, but the cracks were showing. Johnstone wasn't a paradise. It was a prison camp, socialism dressed in utopia. It sat deep inside the jungle of northwestern Guyana, so remote it was nearly unreachable by road. No phones, no newspaper, no visitors, no outside contact. They called it the promised land, but what it was a trap. When Jim Jones moved hundreds of his followers to Guyana in 1977, he promised safety for racism, capitalism, and fascism, and most importantly, the nuclear war. But from the moment the boots hit the jungle floor, the rules changed. People surrendered their passport, money, and Jones controlled the food, the medicine, the radio, even the mail. Every letter going out was censored. Every phone call was monitored. They weren't citizens anymore, they were subjects. Members worked 10 to 12 hours a day in a very hot sun, tending crops and hauling supplies. Meals with boiled rice and gravy, maybe a vegetable if they were lucky. Meat, come on, it was only reserved for the inner circles. The housing, there were tents, sheds, overcrowded dorms, crawling with bugs. Meanwhile, Jim Jones lived in a wooden cottage, air conditioned, stocked with drugs, wine, and imported food. He told them this was equality, but it was control dressed up as a revolution. At night, when the sun disappeared, the jungle went black, the loudspeakers came alive. Jones' voice distorted, drugged, paranoid, flooded the settlement. Rants about CIA assassins. He was always saying that we are surrounded by enemies. They are coming for us. They want us to destroy what we built.
No one could turn it off. The speakers blared into early hours. Children couldn't sleep. Parents sat in silence. Some cried. Others took pills to cope. Everyone had to attend the nightly meeting. Roll was taken. Names called. Absence was noticed. He stood before them in sunglasses, sweating, shouting, and sometimes he preached loud. Other nights he threatened them. He said America is collapsing. The spies were everywhere. That he was the only truth, the only protection they had. He told parents to prepare for the worst, that the children might be a better off dead than captured. Some followers still believed him, others didn't. By then, it didn't matter. There was nothing, and there was nowhere to go. Armed guards patrolled the premier with rifles. The jungle beyond was filled with snakes, heat, and no hopes. Anyone caught trying to escape faced public humiliation or worse. A few were beaten. One was locked in a wooden box for days. Children were made to inform on their parents. It wasn't commute. It was a state of fear, a jungle prison wrapped in banners of love and equality. Every hour in Jonestown was psychological warfare. It was sleep deprivation, food control, public confessions, shaming rituals, all designed to erase resistance. People weren't just tried, they were broken. They forgot what freedom felt like. They forgot how to think. And that was exactly how Jim Jones wanted it. Johnstown wasn't a cult, it was a bomb waiting to go off. In the fall of 1978, the world finally started to look inside Jonestown. Not through a hidden camera, not through a de facto letter, but through the eyes of US Congressman. His name was Leo J. Ryan. He was a Democrat, California, and a former teacher. He was fiercely critical of injustice. He was known for getting his hands dirty, visual. He often visited jails, walking crime-ridden neighbors, even going undercover just to understand conditions the first hand. So when families in the district begged him to investigate Johnstown, when they said their loved ones were being held hostage in the jungle, Leoran didn't just make a phone call, he booked the flight. Rio arrived in Guyana with small delegations of journalists from NBC and the San Francisco Examiner, relatives of temple members, legal aides, and staffers. They touched down at Guyana. Then they made a bumpy ride to the compound. And what they got there? Johnstown was put on show. Smiling kids in matching shirts handed out flowers. Rice dishes were served with awkward and politeness. Jones gave a congressman a tour of his paradise, walking slowly, smiling like a man who had nothing to hide. Behind him, there were armed guards watching closely. He told Ryan that everything was happy there, that no one has been held against their will. The stories of abuse, isolation, and fear were all lies. It was all American propaganda. At first, Ryan was impressed. He said so, even on camera, whatever the comments are, there are some people here who believe this is the best thing that ever happened to them. The cracks slowly had started showing. As the music played and the camera rolled, a man slipped Ryan's side a note, scrambled in pencil. Dear Congressman, please help us get out of Jonestown. And just like that, the mask shattered. More members came forward, quietly, hesitantly, saying they wanted to leave, saying they were scared, saying they weren't allowed to speak freely. Leo Ryan listened and then did something Jones didn't expect. He stood up and said, anyone who wants to live can come with me. 16 people raised their hand. It was over.
or so they thought, and slowly the monster starts to break. Back in his cabin, Jones boiled with fury. He had tried to be gracious, he tried to fool them, and now the enemy was taking his people away. To him, it just wasn't a PR failure, it was an act of war. He summoned the Red Brigade, his armed security unit. He told them to stop the traitors. They are defecting. If they leave, we are finished. Make sure they don't get onto that plane. This is the trigger. It's happening now. It was no longer about saving face, it was about making sure no one is escaped. And the day came. On November 18th, 1978, that afternoon, Leo and the de factos arrived at the airstrip. The atmosphere was tense. The plane was waiting, the cameras were rolling, the crews were preparing to take off, and then what they saw it, a tractor fabbled with trailers slowly approaching onto the armed men, members of the Jones Red Brigade, clutching rifles and shotguns. They did not yell, they did not warn, they just opened the fire. Panic, screaming, blood. Congressman Ryan was shot repeatedly, killed on the spot. NBC cameraman Bob Brown captured the beginning of the ambush, and then he too was gunned down. Reporter Don Harris, photographer Gray Robinson, and the temple de facto Parks were also murdered. A temple member pretending to live pulled a gun from inside the camera bag and shot at a point blank range. The survivors ran into the jungle and lay flat among the dead, pretending to be dead. It was cold and it was calculated. A massacre in a broad daylight. The first and only US congressman ever to be killed in the line of history. So back in Jonestown, as the bullets flew the airstrip, Jim Jones made his final decision. He gathered the entire community in the pavilion. He turned off the loudspeakers and he told them, "It's over. The congressman is dead. They are coming for us now. We will not be taken. Tonight we die with dignity." The jungle was quiet, the gunmen had returned, the congressman was dead, the planes weren't leaving, and Jim Jones was ready to end everything. He called them all to the central pavilion. Every man, every woman, every child. Over 900 people stood beneath the Guyana sun waiting. Some had dirt on their hands from the field, others clutched babies. All of them were tired, hungry, and confused. June sat on a wooden chair, sunglasses on, microphones in hand. Behind him stood a red brigade, his armed guards. Beside him, a vat full of liquid, sweet smelling, innocent looking. Flavor aid, not Kool-Aid, laced with cyanide. He told them that it was a revolutionary suicide. They will be parachuting here any moment. We can't afford to let them take our children. We can't afford to live like this anymore. People began to murmur. Some cried. Some looked around, hoping someone would stop him. No one did. Jones doubled down. Don't be afraid of dying. Death is just a stepping stone over into another plane. We did not commit suicide. We committed an act of political protest. Nurses who were loyal to Jones began filling paper cups with the mixture. Children were brought forward first. Some were injected directly, while others fed the poison by their mothers. Screams began, high pitched, sharp, and from tiny lungs. Mothers begged to keep their children alive. Others cradled them, whispering that it would be all over soon. Babies foamed at the mouth. Toddlers collapsed. One nurse later described the incident as violent, horrific, and unstoppable.
Once the children were gone, it was the adult turn. Some lined up quietly, some refused, some ran. But the perimeter was sealed. Armed guards chased them. No one escaped. Those who resisted were injected forcibly or shot dead. There was no free will left, only survival instinct, and that too was fading. Throughout the entire event, a cassette recorder was running. You can still hear his voice chilling and right ears. They took our congressman. We lay it at their feet. The people in San Francisco will not obey it over this. Hurry, hurry, my children. It's not painful, it's just a moment. We did not like the way the world treated us, so we are leaving it. You hear crying in the background, babies yelling, people mourning. A woman speaks up, she pleads with him to let her children live. John snaps. Mother, 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 please don't do it. Stop this. This is not the way of people who are socialistic communists to die. It wasn't a suicide. It was a command performance, a death ritual. And the last cup were passed out. John reclined on his chair. He did not drink the poison. He shot himself in the head. And when the authorities arrived next day, they found 918 bodies, 304 children, many in their parents' arms, rose up and down, some face down, some together, dozens stacked in clusters, hands still collapsed. A few people survived by hiding under beds, in ditches, in trees, but the scenes were unmistakable. A jungle transformed into a mass grave. The smell was unbearable. The silence was deafening, and in the middle of all of it, a tape recorder was running, saying, "Don't call it a suicide." Historians, psychologists, survivors, they all agree this wasn't a suicide, it was a mass murder. Some followed him willingly, most did not. They were manipulated and brainwashed and then terrorized. Jones had broken the spirit over years, then crushed them in a single night. He robbed them of choice, he robbed them of the children's life, and he robbed the world of seeing how far evil can go when it wears a kind face. Jonestown wasn't a tragedy, it was a lesson in what happens when one voice becomes louder than the rest, when love turns into control, and when hopes fall into the wrong hands. You have been watching SPK Reports, Unmasking Crime, and remember, one story at a time.